and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll approve the consent agenda. Do we have anything on the consent agenda?
Agenda and the non-resident student listing.
Okay.
Mike, would you ever open that? Don't stop me what you
Okay. So, public correspondence and recognition, okay, of either one. Well, this is gonna be a short meeting. I hope. New business,
Yes.
approval of the Pat Gorman asphalt bill.
Yes, thank you, President Matthews. The individual, Pat Gorman, had requested payment upon completion of his project. And this was for the playground and parking lot at Whiteman Elementary, filling the cracks and putting a seal and restriping the handicap areas. I know Dean's very pleased with the outcome of the project, and so we're just asking that we can go on and pay the $13,237.
I wanted to say this.
You did, but it would, you approved us to go, you approved the bid for it, but usually we would pay the bill on the 19th at a regular board meeting, and this vendor has requested early payments and we delayed our board meeting.
I
So
wanted to
you're right.
say, the tennis courts look wonderful, and I believe that the work that they did around the tennis courts, Dean had done and whoever else helped with that, that looks wonderful.
We're very
Really
pleased.
looks good. Hopefully this will be a, more than a short lasting thing. Keep it looking good.
Yes, it's very nice. Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, how long has Mr. Gorman had to wait for his check?
Not very long. He just finished it about a week and a half ago, I would say.
All in favor of,
Well, I'll move that we approve we pay the bill. I'll move that we pay Mr. Gorman's bill.
I'll second it.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, goals
Okay.
for superintendent and evaluation process.
Yes, just wanted to highlight a couple goals for your consideration to serve as my goals for this coming school year. Last year, we did use the pilot NEE superintendent evaluation process, which consisted of setting goals aligned to leader indicators. And we also participated in a survey. And so we still plan to do that. It is still in its development stages, so they have not added more pieces to the model, but they have added a little more to our principal evaluation model, which I went to some training on, and I will be able to pull a lot of data from building improvement plans and to be able to show to support superintendent goals as well, and data points. So the first goal and my two goals that I would like to propose are aligned to our Board of Education goals. The first goal is to develop instructional leaders who monitor student achievement, especially in the area of math and integration of instructional technology. And of course, that touches across two of our Board of Education goals and are aligned to multiple leader indicator standards I have listed out there for you as well. And I do have some action steps listed, some deliverables and timelines, and I will be sharing on a frequent basis how we're progressing on these goals. And then the second goal for consideration is to implement to implement a District 5-year Mission 2020 replacement schedule to continue to identify, address, and communicate needs in areas of instructional resources, facilities, transportation, and technology to district stakeholders. Again, line to 4 leadership leader indicators. We do have some action steps. We are in year 1 of Mission 2020. I'm very excited. Dean and I were talking today and checking off some things that we've already have accomplished for year 1, and we're making progress on that, but I'd like to share that as part of the evaluation process. But also, I will continue to meet with the District Connect Committee, who helped create the Mission 2020 plan. And remember, that's the Superintendent's Really Advisory Committee. It gives input. We have representatives from every employee group, and we will continue to refine and enhance our Mission 2020 plan. Also, another important element of that is to continue to develop and monitor the budget so that we make sure that we are being good stewards and we are moving forward with what we've outlined in the Mission 2020 plan. So I just kind of wanted to share those with you, and was wondering if we felt comfortable maybe with a quarterly update on how we're progressing on these goals, if they look appropriate. I think quarterly is okay with me.
I was looking at, online at MSBA the other day, Dr. Lorenz, and they have e-solutions or e-board solutions or something on there that when I talked to the lady down at MSBA, she indicated to me that because I talked to her about the NEE evaluation,
Yes.
and I think that's part of this process here. She indicated to me that if we went with this particular system, that we could align our superintendent evaluations questions any way we wanted. We didn't have to go. There was some conversation about the NEE evaluation and the numbering system and the redundancy of the questions. And I'm just wondering if that's something we could look into and have somebody look into and contact MSBA on and see what this program involves, or I don't even know if we're already paying the dues for it, or
No,
just separate.
unfortunately, so eBoard Solutions is a product that gets sold, and honestly, you probably talked to Sharon Horvick, who's and she's honestly, she transitioned from being a salesman for that product to being at MSBA.
Right.
And so, but as far as maybe addressing that in it's not cheap. What they want you to do, in fact, we used it this evening. I had an MSBA regional meeting while I was on the phone with before we got here. But it's basically, they want you to move your entire board process onto their server, and so we move all of our documents up there, we move all of our meeting agendas up there. It's really pretty comprehensive, and thus the price is pretty expensive. The last time we looked into it, it was pretty pricey. But what we maybe is a halfway solution, maybe we could address maybe at a future meeting, maybe September, October-ish. Maybe if we can look at the questions that NEE gives us and then say, hey, we don't see any questions. I know last year we were concerned that we didn't see anything about finance on those questions. And so we could say, hey, we want to add some questions about finance. And maybe even if it's not, because we did those via paper, we can just add those questions on paper and then align it to whatever we need to have it aligned to.
Well, she indicated to me that there was different levels of this program that was available for purchase, and not only since we're attempting to go paperless, this would help us go paperless. It would also help our agenda with our agenda items, and maybe lining up. Not to say that we haven't lined them out, but maybe consolidate them a little bit, because some months we have put. I just think it's something that we need to look into and perhaps look at the cost.
Yeah.
It may be cost prohibitive, I don't know. But she said that there were different levels and that we didn't have to go with the top of the line, the Cadillac version of it. She did say that she worked for the company 2 years ago. But you know, it might help with a lot of different things that we're trying to do here, that's all.
That's what we're looking into.
Well, I'd be more than happy to contact MSBA to gather some more information on this and potential costs. I think I just want to really need to know if the board's comfortable with the goals I've set, because they are aligned to our Board of Education goals, which are aligned to the CSEP. And then we can definitely add questions, or we can look into the ES solutions. I just wanted to make sure we're heading in the right
Can we
direction.
look at this and have a second reading? next week,
Absolutely.
so we have time,
We can
chance
talk
to
about it
evaluate our,
August 19th.
look at our board goals and
Absolutely.
compare it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, just a question on the knee evaluation system, since you apparently are up on this. Isn't there a secondary evaluation system other than the knee?
There's several other evaluation systems that are.
There's one that's pretty popular among school
Well, there's the
districts.
state system that they kind of implemented. If you correct me, there's one other system outside of that that really, there's three popular systems. The NEE honestly is, I would think is the most popular system as far as being used in the state now. Just because of the cost is relatively minimal compared to the other systems, and a lot of it's automated. Now, there's a cost to it. It's definitely, there's a cost. But definitely it's also that data is being shared in a group aggregate form, not in an individual, like, you know, I can drill down and say this teacher, how does that teacher perform?
Right.
But they share that data with the entire organization. So there's, I mean, that's valuable to MU as well. But definitely there's three systems out there, but this one right now it started off not being the most popular, but it became the most popular because it started to incorporate a lot of the things that the federal government said you had to have, just by default, by using the technology of it, so.
I might add, the superintendent, the evaluation was a pilot last year, Mr. Pendilli, and they're going to continue a second year of pilot as they develop and get feedback from districts. So they are looking for feedback from boards of education on how to enhance questions, that sort of thing. But I think one reason why last year we chose to kind of move in that direction was because our teachers are evaluated on the knee, you know, our principals are evaluated on that, just to kind of, you know, lead by example there, you know, everyone's on the same evaluation system. But it is a work in progress, and they really are looking for our feedback. And because it's in its second year of pilot, they're not going to charge us. And if you remember, David Lineberry came and visited with us last year, and he thought it was going to cost somewhere around $3,000 or $4,000 potentially, and they're not charging us anything, and don't plan to for a while, because it's a pilot and they want our input. So
For a while, is it a couple of years or?
and that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking 2 to 3 years anyway. But no, it will be, yeah, I know what you mean, a $4,000 bonus frame. No, no, I think this year it will definitely remain a pilot because they want feedback from Board of Education members. They want feedback from superintendents.
And did we give them feedback from our last evaluation?
I did. But they've really, the teacher evaluation system's up and running very well. They've really added to their library, professional development library. There's a lot of online learning. Kelly can speak to this. It's amazing. So they've spent a lot of time and resources there. And then they have really fine-tuned the principal model as well. So pretty pleased with that. My first year back home here at NAW, I used the DESE model before we had the NEE principal. And then when they developed the NEE principal model, we've used it the last 2 years, and they fine-tuned it, and it just seems to be getting better. So excited about that. So I think it'll come. They are gathering feedback on the superintendent.
Is there anywhere on the site where, as board members, we can go and, you know, look at some of the changes that they've made or put our input in there?
For the superintendent one, I don't see anything active online for that, but I will share that with Dr. Doss.
Thank you.
But they do accept emails. They really do, so I could get that information.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay, I guess we're ready for the pipeline.
yes, well, thank you, Ms. Matthews, and I want to thank Mr. Joe Kinder. I've invited him here this evening. He's with George K. Baum, and I've asked him to highlight the anticipated fiscal impact of the state assessed utilities new pipeline that runs through Johnson County, runs through Cass County. It's running through the north central part of the state. It really is, and how the Hancock Amendment will become activated due to the pipeline in our county. So,
Well, folks, thanks for having me down. Let me first say I commend Dr. Williams, Dr. Wheeler, and your administration for kind of getting out ahead of this issue a little bit that you guys are kind of have to keep your eye on. We got some relatively good news today. This is not something that's going to impact you this year or hopefully the next 2 or 3 years, but just kind of give you guys an idea of what's going on and how the Hancock Amendment is actually affecting a huge line item on your budget, which is your heavily impacted aid that you receive. So you guys have pots of money coming from everywhere for your budget. You've got federal aid, you've got state aid, you've got local taxes. And we're kind of going to talk about your local tax rate and how that affects your heavily impacted aid and why you're going to have to keep an eye on it. And some of the history of it is you guys probably all realize that 2 or 3 years ago now, 3 years ago now, you passed a 75-cent levy increase to get up to $3.50. And the main driver behind that was to preserve this state aid, or preserve the heavily impacted aid, because you have a local effort requirement that you levy a high enough amount that you require your taxpayers to pony up and be committed to the community enough to receive this heavily impacted aid. So we raised your levy up here to $3.50 and in your operating side and this local effort side. So you've got this impact aid that you raised, your levy up here to kind of come back and make sure that you still get this impact aid, which is a line item of almost $2 million in your budget. So over here in this local tax bubble, we have not only your tax levy goes into that, but what's called state assessed railroad utility property, which is doled out on a county-wide basis, on a per pupil basis. So basically, it doesn't matter that this pipeline doesn't run through the Mount Auster School District proper. There is a pipeline that runs across Johnson County, and that's going to cause a big spike, a big increase in your state assessed railroad utility property. So basically what happens is the county will levy a tax on this pipeline. And when they get that money, they then, on a per pupil basis across the county, distribute that money out on whatever dollar amount that is. They've got 6,500 kids in the district or in the county, which is probably way low. But just as an example, they'll take the amount of revenue that they have from all the state assessed railroad utility properties, which are transmission lines, by the way. They're not locally assessed. So railroad, telephone, any telecommunications lines, any sort of power line, or and then you have any sort of gas pipeline, anything you would consider kind of the utility, and then railroad. So essentially, they're not locally assessed. So even if it runs through your district, you don't see that money once they start pumping gas through. So they started pumping gas through this. So now that they're going to levy this tax, they're going to have a bigger pot when they levy that tax to distribute. And what that's going to do for you all is it could impact you to the good about $200,000, which sounds great. So you all of a sudden over here in your local tax bubble, you have this $200,000 spike, this $200,000 gain in your revenues for your budget. But how does that affect this federal aid that we have, this bubble over here that's a huge part of your budget? Well, what happens is we have something in Missouri called the Hancock Amendment. And don't ask me when it was enacted because I don't know, but as you were seeing a bunch of growth in the economy in the late 90s and the early 2000s, I think it was sometime in the late 90s or early 2000s, the state legislature decided, as people were seeing, if your home value, you buy your home at $90,000, and all of a sudden it was worth $100,000 the next year just because we were seeing that kind of increase in inflation and home values were going up like that, that it wasn't fair then that you would see that same 11% increase in your tax bill, that your tax bill should stay the same, that you should still contribute the same amount because, ostensibly, let's not make, because you bought a house that's a nice house and the value of it's going up, let's not make your tax bill go up exponentially as home values grow. And so this tax bill was enacted, or this amendment was enacted that basically then makes local revenue a revenue neutral proposition. So that if you see growth due to reassessment, so if home values go up, your tax levy will be driven down. so that you are allowed essentially to have the same amount of revenue every single year, with some increase in the CPI. This year, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, is 0.8%. So you could recapture 0.8% of any growth that anybody saw in their home value. But anything above that, if people's homes went up 2.5%, you would have to then drive that levy back down a little bit. Okay, so if you saw some reassessment growth, maybe go from 350 to 348 or something like that, which isn't that big of a deal in terms of your local effort, the levy that you all passed to get up to that 350 to maintain this heavily impacted aid over here. But what happens is we don't just have that local tax effort, we also have this state assessed road and utility property, because what it really is local. It's locally assessed taxes. It's running through the county, and that's the way the Hancock chooses to take not just your local levy, but also your state assessed road and utility property, which is the line item for you all of just under $2.5 million. It's about a little over $2 million for your local taxes, and then about $400,000 for that state assessed road and utility property. So what's going to happen is you're going to see a big spike, like we talked about, in that state assessed road and utility property. It might go up as much as $200,000 for you all this year. And in fact, the state is requiring that you, in anticipation of seeing that additional revenue, raise that number that you expect to get that goes into that calculation of what your levy will be. So we just did the calculation today. Your guys' levy is going to go down from 350 to 330. So you lost 20 cents on that levy increase that you passed just 3 years ago to maintain this heavily impacted aid. So yeah, $200,000 sounds great over here, but when you're talking about maybe it costs you $2 million over here, that's a big deal. And so you guys, Waynesville, and I couldn't even give you another district in the state, that all of a sudden this Hancock amendment that's meant to be revenue neutral, no matter what happens with your locally assessed property in terms of its value, you should still get the same amount of revenue from local taxes. Okay, so even if you were to see your revenues go down, your tax levy would go up, or what you could potentially levy would go up. But you've got this state assessed road and utility property over here affecting your levy as well. Now there's a chance that it may drop another 10 cents at the end of this year if you really do recoup a full $200,000 or see that $200,000 spike. So basically what's happening is it's just a situation you have to keep your eye on. Again, this heavily impacted aid has a local effort requirement that you levy enough that you be in the top 5%, I think, of the districts in your cohort
Yes.
that you create in order to receive this heavily impacted aid. And then over here you have this pipeline that's driven your levy down. And then you have a couple other things that may drive your levy down as well if the economy starts to own some reassessment growth. But it's something that you have to keep an eye on, because the only solution, unfortunately, is probably going to be you'll be right back in the same situation. And I don't want, and the administration doesn't want that to be a blind side to you all, that, hey, we just passed this levy 5, 6, 7 years ago, and it was going to take care of us for a long time, but then all of a sudden they decided to run a pipeline through the district or through the county, and see your revenue go way up and your levy go way down, and possibly risk losing that heavily impacted aid. And Dr. Lorenz got some news today about how that's going to affect you in the future. But I'll let her go ahead and talk about it. But I want to kind of give you guys an idea of where these two pots are and what's going on.
And Joe, can you stick around
Yeah,
after I
yeah,
do this in case they have questions for either one of us? And thank you so much. You did a great job there. And we did receive a little bit better news. We're still waiting to hear from the state auditor's office to see if they will even accept our proposed percentage of change, because in utilities, because here's the issue. We have a little bit of Pettis County in our school district and a whole lot of Johnson County. Pettis County is not impacted as a higher rate as Johnson County. So we did divide the number. We're waiting to hear back from Becky Webb from the auditor's office, and we'll know something so that we can be able to set our tax levy. But with that in mind, I wanted to share with you a couple things. Here is this a book on getting a grip on the basics of impact aid, and it's a lot of information to digest. But I would like you to take some time reading it, asking questions. I want to tell you, impact aid is a complicated matter. I know Matt Cleveland and I have talked about it at length on different occasions, and it's just something that fluctuates depending on federal funding. But I would like to draw your attention to page 5, and I want to highlight some things just very briefly with you. what Joe was talking about, Mr. Kinder was talking about was our, we received 800,003 money, and he was talking about the B2 monies. That's for heavily impacted districts. And districts to be considered heavily impacted have to have 40% of their student impact, not counting civilian students whose parents work on federal properties, 50% if civilians are counted. And districts must make, quote, a reasonable, end quote, tax effort, meaning how federal statutes, federal law defines it as 95% of the state average. We are put into cohort groups, districts similar in size to us for this comparison. Now, districts also must have less revenue per student than the state, and then the law, if you read it closer, says the federal average is, it can be state or federal at this point. And so we do receive that B2 money. We do receive just basic 8003 money, B money, which is where if we have at least 400 federal students, federally connected students, military connected students in our ADA, we do receive basic impact aid. We also receive 8003D monies for special education to help support the education of our learning disabled students. We also at times, sometimes are eligible for some construction money, but really since our facilities are in really good shape, that's rare, but they call that 8007 money. And I just kind of wanted to highlight that real quick, but I wanted to speak with you on how it's impacting us. The impact status update on B2 eligibility. I just wanted to, and Joe kind of highlighted this. Our levy was passed in 2013, in spring in 2013. But the impact of that levy will not go into effect until 14. And you have to realize that the federal government pays us 3 years off 3 years ago data. So what we turn in on our impact aid annual application, we're being paid off of what our demographic numbers were, our military connected numbers were from 3 years ago. Okay, which is a little confusing, but that's how they figure it. So our eligibility for B2 that heavily impacted in fiscal year 15 and 16, so this year and next year, does not assume our new levy calculation. We're still going with the old. And with that calculation, I want to make you feel a little better. We're at 99%. So we're okay, okay, right now. Current projections do have Knob Noster maintaining eligibility. Our levy that was passed in 13 will go into play in 17, and we will project a spike in our eligibility. And we see maybe our contribution effort maybe jumping up to 105%. That makes me feel a lot better, and it should you as well. But these are just projections. We have not built actual number projections because we can't predict what counties, what school districts are going to set their levy at. Risks to consider, which is beyond fiscal year 17, which they rely on 13-14 data. Remember, it's 3 years back. We don't know what will happen to levies statewide. When anyone in our cohort group, similar size group that we're placed in, raises their levy, it impacts us. It impacts us in a negative way because it could lower our percentage. The other category relates to what Prop C funding does, what our assessed evaluation, as Joe mentioned, which cannot be predicted past fiscal year 17. Other things to consider are student enrollment, per pupil expenditures, and the unknown, the impact aid funding itself. But I do want to share with you our military connected numbers we had this past school year, okay, and what we had. We began the year this last fall with 780 military connected students. Okay, so we meet the requirement for the basic, easy there, right? Because we have at least 400. And we meet the B2 as well, but we ended the school year with 754 military connected students. So that's a difference of 26 students by the end of the year. Now, the count starts over beginning this next year. And Katie and I work very, very hard to make sure those count numbers are correct. And what we do is every week we look at our numbers to see our student classification. How many students have military parents who live on base? How many students their parents are in the military but they live off the base? How many students have parents that work for the federal government? You know, we have to keep track of all those numbers. And what we do is we find the count date that gives us the highest yield, and that's what they allow us to do. We have to make that determination sometime between September and really late November, early December, because that application is due in January. And it takes a long time to crunch those numbers, to double check, and to make sure that we feel comfortable signing off on those numbers to the federal government. I do want to share with you our district per pupil expenditure for 2014, and that's what we have. They haven't released 15 officials, but was $9,295. The state average was $10,127, and I think the national average was around $11,100. So I wanted to share with you, due to the Hancock Amendment and increase in the pipeline utilities, the tax rate ceiling may potentially have to drop, and it may range anywhere from what Joe shared from $3.30 to ballpark $3.21, somewhere around that. We are still awaiting numbers from the state auditor's office. The bottom line is, right now, we are in compliance for meeting eligibility for basic impact aid. We are in compliance and meet the criteria for B2, the heavily impacted funding. But that is something we definitely want to keep on our radar, because there's a lot of variables we can't control. You know, those levees being set, we don't know if more pipelines are going to come in, or railroad utilities, whatever the case may be. So the outcome here is probably we know this will happen when we come to you at the tax rate hearing on the 19th. It will probably be somewhere below the 350 that we currently have that was approved by our voters. But again, we would still be in compliance within the 95% levels. I know it's very confusing, and I'd be happy to visit with you more about this. But do you have any general questions? Guys, this is why it's so important that we go to our Impact Aid conferences every year, and that we stay involved with NAPIS and with NISA, because they're advocating for funding every year for us. They hold workshops to help us identify ways where we can maximize the most on our application, because we get one chance each year to fill out that application. I'm telling you, it's arduous process, and I appreciate all Katie's help on that. But we work and work and work on that, and you get one chance to submit it. We submit it, and then we don't find out. We have to submit it in either latter part of January, first part of February. This year it's towards the end of January, and then we don't find out until October what we're eligible for.
So worst case scenario is we would have to go back to the people and say, we need to raise the tax levy.
Back to 350. Now,
So I guess I just don't understand, Joe, and you probably can explain this, is we had the vote, but that vote for the 350 wasn't really for 350. It was really 350 based upon the current conditions at the time that we took the vote. And so we would be asking, and then for the taxpayers to be, supporting us again at 350 at the new conditions. Is that what we'd have to do in order to be able to get back to 350?
Right. Yeah, unfortunately, there's no longer could you just say, we're gonna vote and our levy on the operating will be $350 until we decide we're gonna lower it as a board, or until we run another election. Well, all we do is what you did in 2013 was say, we're going to reset our tax rate ceiling to $3.50. And the tax rate ceiling is a calculation that you do every single year. So that year in August of 2013, when you would have ordinarily been working off your 275 levy and rolling up on Amendment 2, we threw that Form A out, which is the calculation that kind of makes that a revenue neutral proposition, and started over from outside in a different form, saying, okay, now our tax rate ceiling is $3.50. And then next year, we make that calculation again. And it's based on, again, it's meant to be a revenue neutral proposition. So that this pot of money right here stays this size, stays at about $2.5 million for you all. And there's any number of things that can affect that, but yes, any sort of reassessment growth, and when I say reassessment growth, I mean growth in your assessed value on existing property. Not if you had something come across the highway here and then put in, some industrial plant that was worth $3 or $4 million in assessed value, you can recoup all of that. That wouldn't drive your levy down. That just goes right on to the rolls with you. But if everybody's homes say they're worth, the assessor decides that based on, the economy doing better, they're worth 3.5% more than they were before, that's going to drive that levy down to keep that revenue, that pot the same size. So if you see, if you go from $60 million to $63 million in assessed value, then you're going to lower your levy so that you get local taxes at around a little over $2 million.
And what if the local assessed values don't go up then, or you're saying they will change due to this pipeline? Regardless.
Right. So that in this pot of money that they call the state, for this Hancock Amendment purposes, calls local tax revenue, is the state assessed road utility property. So you have two people coming into this, but the federal government doesn't say, okay, well, you guys are kicking in $2.5 million and close to it. That's where we'd like to see you be at. Where they've come, is that this is affected only by this portion of it, that just your local effort in terms of your levy, not in terms of the state assessed road utility property. So even though the state assessed railroad utility property, as it goes up, it will drive your levy down, it doesn't affect the calculation for the heavily impacted aid. I know that's a little bit convoluted, but
Is because we're a rural district, is that taken into consideration at all, or I know, like, what I'm understanding is we're put on the same level as like Warrensburg, that was a little bit more heavily industrial and so forth, or is the rural districts given a break?
Well, no, we're put into some more cohort groups. So for example, because our ADA has gone down, we moved into a different cohort group. So we wouldn't be compared necessarily with Warrensburg.
So we're in the same boat as Waynesville.
We're in, yes, and I'll be on, guys, this is affecting everybody in Johnson and Cass County. And I mean, Warrensburg's going to, and some other neighboring districts are going to have to lower their potentially lower their levies as well.
So we can lower the levy at our tax rate hearing, in the board. But in order to bring it back up again, we have to go to the voters.
That is correct.
the only thing that would, the opposite is true of that as well. So if they were to decide, if this county assessor decides that home values go down, now they would have to go down drastically. I mean, it would be a very negative effect to recoup, to get, 20 to 30 cents back up to 350. But again, it's revenue neutral. So if the value of the assessed value of the property that you're taxing goes down, that levy will kind of go up. But it's usually incremental. It's 5-6 cents at the most.
Well, I have never seen property taxes go down.
Well, no, and I mean, school districts are seeing anywhere from 10 to 30 some cents that they have to
Every
reduce their
district where
levy.
this pipeline goes, it's coming in Cass County, just south of Kansas City there, it's kind of running a slight, west and north, or mostly west and a little bit north path. Everybody's gonna be in that same boat, as these 375.
Right.
They're all gonna be seeing their levy driven down. Warrensburg is gonna see their levy driven down. Everybody, so a bunch of Cass County districts. What the unfortunate thing is they're all seeing that spike in state assessed rate utility property that will offset.
Just doesn't make any sense that it
They'll get the impact.
just doesn't make any sense that it would go down because of the value of the pipeline. I don't understand. that's the part I'm not grasping.
Maybe we could share with.
Because the value of the pipeline would be valuable, you think, to the area. So why does that drive everything down?
It's the hand.
Yeah,
Common sense, I'm trying to think of it within common sense, and that makes no sense.
Well, this isn't the only place that the Hancock Amendment gets, government entities into trouble. I mean, as far as tax revenue, it was intended, as a conservative principle to say, hey, your taxes are one thing. We're not going to just raise your taxes because things change. We're not just going to raise your taxes automatically. And so that was the purpose behind it. But in the fine print of it, it gets into situations like this with local entities like us that have a kind of peculiar requirement when it comes to the federal government as far as the amount of percentage we have to maintain.
Yeah.
And the irony of it is, when Joe and I were calculating numbers and seeing difference, if we were able to keep it at 350, we would generate somewhere around $2,083,666. But if we have to drop it to the 330, $3.30, we'll get around $1,950,000. But if you get 200,000 from the pipeline and you subtract that $133,000 difference, it still puts you ahead $66,000
Well, what happens
from
if you-
this local and state.
What happens if you just don't drop the tax rate?
Oh, we have to.
Unfortunately, it's not an option. So when Dr. Williams, it's an online, she gets a login and password, and it's a formula, and you just simply fill it in. There's only like 3 or 4 fields you can even fill in, and the state auditor kicks you back what they call a pro forma that lines out your tax rate ceiling. So you won't even have an option. Even the highest you can run it at is where it'll be at this year. And that's just.
And she hasn't told us what she's going to accept yet, what percentage.
Again,
we'll
this
have
is
to find
ostensibly a revenue neutral proposition, the Hancock Amendment, but it does not work that way at all for you all. And
Right.
it's-
Well, at what point are we gonna receive some accurate dollar figures from the pipeline?
Well, this year, so gas started running this year, so you should start seeing that additional revenue this year, which is why, for the first time ever, by the way, the state auditor's office, in setting your tax rate, is making you incorporate at least 95% of what they expect to see revenues do. So it used to be you waited until that actually occurred, until you actually saw that revenue and you had a hard dollar figure to actually lower your levy. Now they're making you do it prospectively ahead of time. And the problem with that is levies across the county are going to go down. Well, that state assessed road utility property is levied based on an average levy. So when they're saying that you're going to see another $220,000, that's based on what the levies currently are. And what's going to happen across Johnson County is people's levies are going to be driven down sharply. And so the odds are that it will be, even though we played a little bit of a game here with saying Pettis County isn't seeing a gain, so we're going to go halfway, and it looks like the state auditor is going to accept that. There's a chance that you won't see that full $220,000 when Warrensburg's levy drops and your levy drops and everybody else who's got Holden or whoever else has property within Johnson County.
So if we have to go back to the voters, you're gonna be the one explaining this, right? I mean.
I'll be happy to be an informational resource.
I think one thing that I wanted to clarify, the function of the vote itself negates the Hancock Amendment from
In that particular year.
if we take a vote, then that, the Hancock Amendment does not get it, because you voted the second levy where you said it. So assuming we don't have another pipeline come through in the future, if we were to say 2 years out, were to go before the voters and ask to go back to where we were originally at 350, then we could use that a year, as long as we don't have some sort of increased Hancock effect in years out, on the out years, that would hopefully seal it in for us again, as long as we didn't have another big event like this.
And and we thought for a while, until we found out they were going to make us do the 95% this year, even before we even know how much gas they're gonna pump through the line. We thought maybe we could set a 3.4999 and then maybe increase it by 1,000 just to maintain, but we can't even do that. You know what I mean? We would have to ask for
And
the 350, so it'd be more like 20 cents.
put this in writing, this is a verbal, this is all of a sudden they've changed their policy this year. And I'm sure that it's due, I can't say this for certain, but my guess is that it's due to some political pressure they're receiving based on what's happening with this, based on this pipeline. But had they not done that, that would have been an option, and that's why we were trying to get out in front of this thing. It happened to be that the state auditor decided to change their policy where we would have done something. That was our idea, was to kind of step away from that Hancock Amendment calculation this year when that goes online and start fresh, start anew. That's not going to be an option. So if you're going to do it this year, it would still be likely to be a 20-cent increase on your tax rates, back up to 350.
So we really don't know what our options are yet.
You don't know how soon you'll even need to do anything. It seems like
We'll never know.
4 years.
We will never know. I mean, we won't have firm data because we're in 3 years arrears data with the federal impact, federally impacted data. In order to stay ahead of that, we have to make predictions, and
They're
that
only
and it's gonna be
predictions.
yes.
Okay. So if the vote is, if we go to the public and we ask for a vote and it's negated, like he says it's negated, then is that good for another 3 years? If we go to them and ask for 350 again?
It would be good until another event kicked the Hancock Amendment in.
Or we-
other levies
levies
go
from
up,
other people in the
or
state go up.
or
Yeah.
assessed valuation.
That
I
was
mean,
what
there's
was-
so many variables that we have no control over, so they're guesstimations,
And Mike can speak to that, because definitely you were on the board when we decided to go for, the 350, that was the whole deal, is that we wanted to lock in at a certain rate so that we could have a few extra years padded in there.
Yeah,
Where we thought that the levies would not increase that much across the state, so we'd still be.
it came back to that whole level of effort, local level of effort. And it was the percentage, we were starting to get really low in the percentage, and other districts, in the meantime, continually were increasing their levies. So every year we were looking at, if they continue increasing, we continue going down. And Waynesville was in the same boat, and I mean, we both were scrambling that same year. That potentially the next year would be too late because you vote on it this year, but it doesn't take effect until the next year. So that's why we were trying to get out ahead of that to ensure we kept our B2 money. And so really this is just coming back, kicking it back in full circle now. And as we're talking about this, sure, our county is impacted. So the big thing to remember though is just because ours is, and we're in that cohort group, doesn't mean that cohort group, they're going down. If they don't have a pipeline in their county, their tax levy still can continue to increase. And that's where it would then kick us, kind of come around and get us, because they're going to keep raising up. We bump down, even though right now this year we think we're 105%, we could easily be 97% next year like that, just because they raise.
and we think that
Waynesville's not, and we're in correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're in a different cohort
Yes,
with
we
them
are.
just because of size.
we
of
used to
district.
be, actually, we used to be in the same one, we dropped out because of our ADA numbers, the size
This
of
reason,
numbers.
yeah. So you're right, ma'am. If they don't have an effective pipeline, then sure, they just got to do whatever they need to their tax levy to maintain B2. But so that's the deal, is we could slide down and all our other cohort groups could keep raising theirs up because they didn't get this kicker and didn't have to about Hancock.
Yeah.
You know what the
Well,
time
and it's
is.
not, the
My dad
irony
always
is, it's
said,
not
"No,
even
it's
in our
free,
history,
dude."
it's in our So, well, Joe, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming to talk about the pipeline and the Hancock Amendment, the impact. Really appreciate it a lot.
Does anybody else have I'm sure we're gonna have tons of questions.
And then I'll continue to be in touch with Dr.
Yes.
Moran, Dr. Wheeler, and we'll keep an eye on it. But just so that you're not blindsided in 3 years or something, if this issue doesn't ever pop up, you remember, and we know what we're talking about now, we know what we have to do. So just wanted to make sure you all understood that.
Appreciate your help. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, the district assessment plan.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams.
Is that this one here?
You should have had in your packet some information about our district assessment plan. And we are really looking to try and provide a balanced assessment plan for our students. So when we're talking about a balanced assessment plan, there are really three components to that. First of all, there are formative assessments within it. And what the formative assessment is that in-class check, when the kids are looking at you a little confused, you go through, you remediate right then. And you kind of just take a pulse of the class as you're walking around and you're teaching it. It's that immediate instructional change. That's very important in any classroom to have, so we wanted to make sure that was in our plan. We also included benchmark assessment. Benchmark assessments can do a couple of things for us. It can tell us where students are at that moment and help us to diagnose any misconceptions and things of that nature. And then it also can tell us what kids have already mastered. So if you were to give a benchmark assessment and 95% of your kids had mastered those concepts, you wouldn't spend 2 weeks teaching them. You would move on to things they hadn't mastered and just do some remediation with the ones you had at that point. Then the third type of assessment is a summative assessment. Those are a lot of times your big state tests or summative assessments. When they've finished a unit in the class, those are summative assessments. And so all three of these kind of just tell you how well they learned and retained the information. That's what a summative assessment is. So all three of these are important to have a balanced assessment. So the balanced assessment plan is what we're presenting to you tonight. There are some changes that you'll note as you go through. We did try to look at the assessments we are giving to ensure that we are not only giving assessments that are diagnosing and helping us to intervene with students in appropriate ways, but also that we are not over-assessing our students, because we are very conscious that we want to make sure that whatever we're giving our students that we're going to utilize. And so that was very important to us. So you will see some changes in this plan from last year. Another thing that we did is we looked at our middle school, specifically 7th and 8th grade, and they are using the same programs as the high school for collections, for ELA, and we're starting to move. Our math is the same as well, so Algebra 1 is the same. Additionally, our students at the 8th grade level can take English 1, and so they can get a high school credit for English 1, and they can also get a high school credit for Algebra 1. So we wanted to make sure that those assessments were mirrored, and so that'll be another change that we'll have seen in this assessment plan. Because we felt like it was really important if they're getting high school credit that it's the same course, and that they're assessed in the same way, and we're able to speak the same about those students' abilities. Okay, you have an assessment calendar in there, and you'll notice that we did include a little bit more assessment in math. We added another benchmark so that we are taking a benchmark assessment prior to school, or right as school starting, and that benchmark is normed for the end of the year. So we do not expect kids to be totally achieving and all the way proficient on that first test. That's not the point. The point is to help us see how well they're growing throughout the year. So then we'll come back at the quarter, and after first quarter, they'll take an assessment again. There's a couple of reasons for this. Not only do we want to make sure that we are mirroring at the high school at that 7th and 8th grade level, but when we started looking at our change in our Missouri Learning Standards, those changes took place. So the group that is our 3rd grade, was our 3rd grade last year, this started when they were in kindergarten. So we've been forward planning. And so we started those students with the standards that they were going to be assessed on. So the students who are currently in 5th grade through seniors in high school had a shift in those standards. And so the standards changed. So we know that there's maybe a few more gaps, a few more things that we need to look at to fill. And we've been trying to fill this as we go, but we understand that the standards changed on them, and so we want to make sure that we are providing the best education that we can, and that we're filling those gaps. So we have just a little bit of change there. Do you have any questions for me?
One question I have, you're saying benchmarks.
Yes.
which I understand what a benchmark is, but what if there's a child that doesn't absolutely meet that benchmark, then what?
We have several different programs. There is going to be tutoring after school for those students, but then we also provide intervention every day in the buildings. So those students are provided intervention time. There's about 30 minutes that they get intervention in that content.
Okay, then what about the ones that exceed the benchmark?
Then we always try to encourage our teachers to provide challenge questions for those students, to provide extra opportunities for those students to take what they know and to challenge themselves to go on and to enrich their learning.
But is that fair to them?
Yes.
Put them on their own? I mean,
No, they're not on their own.
aren't they given an advanced class or moved into a different area or something, or just,
Well,
It depends. I mean, if it's one standard, then no, that wouldn't be appropriate to move them into an advanced class. But we do in math, we do advance our students so they're able to take high school credit in 8th grade. We advance our ELA students so they're able to take a high school credit by 8th grade. And then at the high school level, they're able to take dual credit opportunities as well. So they are enriched in that way.
We have, 2 years ago, I think, and this year we'll have an 8th grade student who will be ready for geometry. And so he will go to the high school to take his geometry class. So we do, when they're ready to move on and need more of a challenge and they're accelerated, ready to go, we put every support in to make sure that happens.
so what do we do with the student who doesn't meet, I understood what you said, but what do you do with the student in the class that doesn't meet the benchmark during the class time?
That's,
If they don't understand the principle, what do we do then?
we differentiate our instruction, and so we'll, while the other students are maybe doing their independent practice, we'll pull those kids one-on-one, and we'll work with them. We may pull a small group that has the same need, and we'll remediate. Teachers will tutor, teachers will pull kids in. I see teachers pull kids in, some of our math teachers go right into the gym where the kids are waiting and say, hey, we need to work on some stuff, and they'll take them to the class and work with them while they're waiting for class to start. And we really do actively seek to help our students and try to intervene as much and as often as we can.
We also have the RTI time, the ROARS
Yeah,
time,
so we
and
talk-
so it's built in during the school day where that's the time to really focus on those benchmarks they need to go along.
But we don't have any actual remediation type teachers, do we, for areas that the child is not advancing in, or
We do have a reading skills class in 7th and 8th grade, so if our students are not reading on grade level, they do have a remediation.
only in reading though? What about math?
We do a lot of other interventions for math. At this point, we do not have a remedial math course. We haven't seen the need as great, and a lot of times what the issue is for math is sometimes that reading of the question. So we've looked at how to break down questions and help students learn how to break down questions, trying to work on it both ways. So they get the math skills and RTI. So that's something.
We also are Title I services.
Yes, at the elementary
Elementary.
levels, we are trying to.
So there's interventions there.
So did you say that last year's 8th grade students that participated in English 1 or Algebra 1 would receive that credit when they moved to high school this year?
Yes, they do.
So we're gonna provide mentoring after school? That's not
We do
through
have
the,
mentoring.
that's not through the mentoring program.
We have mentoring after school. There's also tutoring this year that
We do, yeah,
implemented.
this year.
And then teachers will tutor their students on their own. As a classroom teacher, I needed to work with kids, we work together. And all of our teachers are dedicated and they'll do that for the students as well.
Does the mentoring program, is that an in-house mentoring program, or is that the program that involved in military individuals?
Well, the actual mentoring program is the one we have with the Air Force Base in the community, but we built in an academic intervention time after school. So there will be at least 1 or 2 teachers who will run after school tutoring assistance, I think up to 2 days a week.
Are they required to go to that class or that session, or is it on a, like, I'll do it if I want to type thing?
Well, we would hope to partner with parents to strongly, encourage the child to attend, but it would be up to the parent.
And I know that at the high school, they do, if the student's struggling during their academic advisement time after lunch.
Right.
They'll require them to go to that.
My other question was the amount of testing we're giving these kids. We're testing them at the end of the school year, and then we're testing them again at the beginning of the school year. Isn't the data that we collect one way or the other enough? I mean, is it not enough? Do we?
Well, no, it's not enough because what happens is we all know that there's a summer slide. If they haven't been in summer school, that kids they don't retain everything. So we want to assess what they did retain. But the other part of that is when you move from one grade level to another, the standards change. So we want to assess where they are on those standards, not just how well they mastered the year before, but how are they doing for that next grade level. So when you're in fourth grade, at the end of the year, you take a third grade benchmark that's normed for the third grade. And then at the beginning of fourth grade, we look at what are your fourth grade skills so that we know how to retain and help students to attain this fourth grade concepts.
To me, it's the same thing. You're testing them at the end of third grade. You already know what their skills are. I just think.
They're different standards though. We have different expectations
With grade levels.
with grade levels, and some of those are very different between grade levels.
And a long time ago, we learned in education, and thank goodness we did, that we can't just use after the fact data to say, well, we taught that well, or we didn't teach it so well. You know, that's why it's important that we have benchmark tests, formative tests, so that we can help more clearly to identify where our gaps are, you know, where we're doing well and where we need to go back and reteach some things where we're really struggling. And so we're doing a lot better job with that now. We have some very high functioning data teams, particularly in our elementaries, and we're growing them in our middle school and high schools. We're very excited about that. And that will be part of our PLC data teaming, interdisciplinary work, professional development this year. So.
On the test.
And we've had done several, and we tried to narrow it into exactly what we need in order to provide the best academic curriculum for our students.
I'll move we approve the balanced assessment plan as presented.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And most of the year, I'm giving tests, at least, I'm giving a summative every other week. And math tests like all the time. It's really average. It's just,
I guess I don't have a problem with reading, writing, and arithmetic. I see science, and several other things on here, study island, I don't know what that is.
it's.
And it's a constant, you know, I hated tests when I was in school. You know, you're constantly, not only are you taking these tests for them, you have the math test at the end of the school year, then you have the teacher's test, and test, you know, and, you know. We need to.
Grade them all.
Yeah, that's right. Let's
You
roll
know,
it.
you're putting a little bit more on yourselves by that, when it should be more of a one-to-one individual need and,
Well, and it's the assessments that help us get to that individual need. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to figure that out
Right.
unless we had something.
but when our classroom sizes are extreme, then it's kind of hard to put a one-to-one on individual help.
Exactly.
Okay, and then I'm not, you know, not, at the high school class, our classroom sizes are extreme, but some of our elementary classrooms and our middle school classrooms are extreme. And I understand the group concept over at the middle school, okay, because it was explained to me. The individual teachers in the elementary school don't have that help per se. So when some of these kids are falling behind and we lose them at the elementary school level, we haven't done any service to them we can test them as much as we want, but unless we provide some help in the classroom, we haven't achieved any goal, okay? Because then they get up to the high school level, and you might as well forget about it.
I think we need to play with this
Thank you.
on there.
Thank you, Ms. Williams.
Thank you.
Okay, do we need a break? Or we want to
I can use the restroom real quick, but
Well,
just real quick.
Let's have
It
a
always
motion,
has to go back.
motion to,
Like you get old.
I make the motion that we adjourn to executive session pursuant to RSMO 610.0213, 610.02113, 610.0211, and that is it.
okay, we need a roll call vote. Aye.
Aye.
A quarter after.
Thank you.
So many others tonight.
Thank you so much.
When years, the last couple of years, we've had set up a little station at Open House to like have people sign up. That'd be a big problem for you. That's Monday night for you, and that's Tuesday night for you, from 4:30 to 6 here, and then from. I thought about it, and it's okay. It's like, yeah, right. Maybe from.
Didn't get a darn lick credit for it. Because I just did the activation. At the time, we tried to get.
Okay, I'll send you an email, that way you can forward it out to whoever you need to forward it to and get it done. Yeah, so I don't want to write posts, but definitely that was really helpful to get kids to sign up.
It would keep it.
We love taking off there, and, you know, especially computers that don't have access for those kids in their school. It's a great opportunity. Okay. Sounds great. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you.
You know, this was great. We were great.
Is that all right?
Yeah. It's,
Let us know if they're.
yeah, it's good. And the whole work.
Yeah, we're excited.
How are you?
Good, I'm good. I'm good. I think,
It's working.
well, this week, I didn't have one free night this week. Although, well, Monday I did. Monday I was off, but my son is, well, I was driving back from Kansas City Monday night because he flew to New Zealand to do a semester of school. So Monday was taking him up.
Then we're gonna wait without shaking your hand. Good to see you.
Good seeing you. Tuesday night, let's see, this is Thursday, right? Tuesday. I was kind of.
That's a trip. That's a trip over there.
Yeah, it is.
It's a great
They get
program.
It's worth it if you're gonna stay.
13 and a half hours on the plane to San Fran to. He's there till 27 November. So we're gonna go over at the tail end of his, well, at the end. But he was born in Australia. I was, of course, military, so he was born over there. He tried to get into Australia for school, and the two schools he applied to, they'd already filled their quotas. It's through UCM's program. So he, because initially he got approved for New Zealand. They said, yep, you got approved. I really want to go there. I said, well, turn it down, apply there. If you don't get in there, then you can go back to New Zealand. So that's what he ended up doing. So we're going to go leave Thanksgiving. We haven't bought our tickets yet. Leave Thanksgiving Day, get over there on a Saturday. He's going to travel. He's gonna fly on Saturday. I gotta bump it up with his flight, so. And the other option is leave like the day early, but then we're, I mean, we'd be in Australia a day early, big deal. And then we're gonna spend about 6 days there, get there on a Saturday and leave out the following Friday. We're gonna fly over, because he was born in Adelaide, which is, kind of in the middle. So we're gonna at least one day fly over to Adelaide, show them the hospital. Here's where you're born. We hung out in this town for about a week, and then we lived 6 miles north of it, or 6 hours north. Yeah, it's not close.
Have you been back to university?
Did stateside, yeah.
Yeah, went back to Jeez.
I've been having a privileged conversation on this open mic cafe.
No.
So much. It changed